I woke up to a silence that felt like it'd wait, like a room that had been emptied while I slept and someone had taken the air with them. My phone buzzed and lit up, and every message thread ended at the same place: red receipts, blue dots, nothing else. 10 people had unfollowed or blocked me overnight. The group chat was a museum of unread texts that stopped mid-sentence and never came back to finish. I called Hannah, my friend of almost 10 years, and it went straight to voicemail. I called Marcus and the line cut off. His number returned, not in service. Lee didn't pick up. Every unanswered call was a small, hot coin landing in my gut. I paced my apartment like it was a stage I'd suddenly been removed from, rehearsing everything I might have said wrong without understanding which word had done the damage. I kept replaying last night, Ava's apartment warm with laughter, the music barely loud enough to blur the edge of our voices, the way we crowded on her balcony and joked about nothing. We took photos, always the same dumb angles, and took them seriously like we were making a memory that would hold. When I called Ava now, she picked up, heard me, and without a beat said, "Don't contact me." She clicked the phone dead while the words lived inside me like a slap. I texted, "What happened? Did I do something?" It showed delivered, and then within minutes my number was gone from her contacts. Blocked. Vanished. My hands trembled while I scrolled through the last images I had with them. A candid at 1:10 a.m., Lee, Aaron, and me grinning, arms tangled. We looked like idiots and like we loved being idiots. By morning, both Lee and Aaron had cropped me out of their stories, their profiles, anywhere the night had once shown us together. Someone had gone through photos carefully, framing every shot so I didn't appear. One clip of the party showed my hand holding a red cup and then cut away. Someone had decided I shouldn't be visible anymore. Panic arrived slow at first and then fast, like a faucet turned wide. I called anyone who might explain, but each call bent into the same shape: a polite lie and a sudden end. I knocked on Hannah's door even though she'd ignored my voicemail, and she opened it a crack, clenched, and asked, "You know what you did?" Her voice was small. She didn't give me time to answer before she slammed it. I stood on the stoop for 5 minutes listening to the muffled sound of her apartment and felt like I was being erased in real time. I went back to my car and tried to breathe. My chest wanted to break from the inside out. I searched my email for anything: a screenshot, a message, a rumor that could explain the sudden fear. There was nothing but work memos and a newsletter about a local bar's happy hour. When I texted Lee asking the same question, she replied, "Check your email." I did twice, 3 times, nothing. She answered again with, "Then you deleted it and blocked me." A sentence that made 0 sense and landed like a brick I couldn't move. I called my ex out of a kind of desperate geography, someone who still knew a lot about me. He said Ava had called him and asked strange questions about whether I'd ever done anything disturbing. The way he said the word made it something I had never been and might now be accused of being. I tried to piece together the night from the crumbs left behind. Did I say something in a joke, something that had been misunderstood and then amplified? Did one drunk word become a story that grew teeth by morning? I knew my worst moves, and I had lived through them with these people. They had forgiven more than once. So what rumor, what image, what photo could have flipped the whole room against me in one night? My mind made itself a theater of possibilities and refused to let them go. When messages started to come in from other people I hadn't expected, brief, cold, saying only that everyone's seen it, I felt like I had been moved through a mirror into a world where my face no longer fit. Sleep left me. I didn't eat. I walked the city in a kind of stupor, checking every notification like a man watching for shore on a boat that had lost its compass. I questioned every laugh I'd shared, every inside joke, as if one of them had been a trapdoor. The silence from people I loved was louder than anything outside my window, and it kept replaying that image of the 3 of us at 1:10 a.m., a picture that should have proved nothing and suddenly proved everything against me. I needed an explanation, and I had no way to get one other than keep knocking on doors and dialing numbers into the dark. I drove to Hannah's building because we'd been best friends for nearly a decade, and I needed answers I couldn't get by text. She opened the door a crack, kept it mostly closed like she was holding something dangerous away, and looked at me with eyes that were all panic. "You know what you did?" she asked, voice high and small. Then she shut the door so fast I felt the air leave my lungs. I knocked until my knuckles hurt and she didn't reopen it. Standing on her stoop with the city breathing around me, I felt the world compress into that one slammed door and a question that sounded like an accusation, but had no words attached. I called Marcus and he didn't pick up. I called Lee and she let it ring and then sent a text that said, "Not me," and nothing more. Even people I'd only seen at work or at parties started repeating the same pattern. A flat, tired message that suggested they knew something, but then closed off like a bank vault. "We can't talk about it," one friend said before hanging up. On social media, I watched people I'd trusted go from visible to invisible, removing photos and muting tags, and every click felt like another hinge snapping closed. When I tried to explain myself, I was met with polite refusals and sudden blocks. The more I pressed, the more the network around me retracted until I felt a small, isolated island where there had been a neighborhood. I replayed the night over and over like a scratched record, hoping a clean moment would jump out and tell me I was fine. The party had been the usual: gossip about bosses, ribbing about bad dates, and a few lines about that show we all binged and swore was the best thing on TV. The jokes were the same dumb ones I'd always told. The drinks were measured, 2 over 4 hours. I wasn't sloppy. I wasn't belligerent. I had gone home in a calm taxi. Nothing in the memory matched the scale of what was happening now. If there'd been one mean comment, one careless message, I'd understand the fallout. But this sudden erasure, 10 people in a single night, didn't square with any version of myself I knew. It hit me that whatever had happened wasn't just gossip. It felt planned, precise. The pictures from the night had been altered in a way that showed intent. Photos cropped to exclude me, a video cut so only my arm appeared holding a cup, as if someone had gone through images deliberately choosing what not to show. That choice felt like a map someone had folded and refolded until each crease pointed away from me.
Sorry for the quick interruption. If you're enjoying this so far, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and leave comment below. It really helps the channel grow. All right, let's jump back into the story.
I kept thinking about the 1:10 a.m. candid of Lai, Aaron, and me. Where that image had been and then disappeared, what replaced it in other people's feeds. The idea that one tiny, private moment could be turned into a weapon made my hands shake. I didn't want to be dramatic, but I started to feel hunted. Every unanswered call, every blocked number, was a step in a pattern that suggested coordination. I started to make lists of who'd cut me off, and when, the timestamps forming a jagged sort of timeline I couldn't read. Messages from friends that had been friendly the night before were now clipped and cold. Old jokes were treated like evidence. I thought of the people who'd stood up for me before, the ones who had seen my worst and said it didn't define me. Where were they now? Their silence felt like betrayal, but I also felt the strange, heavy weight of their fear. If they were scared, maybe something real had happened that I couldn't see. Then Nora, a coworker who'd always been blunt and practical, agreed to meet for 5 minutes in a busy cafe. She said she couldn't talk at length, but she'd meet me publicly. When she sat down across from me, she looked like someone who'd had sleep wrestled from her rather than stolen. Her hands were folded tight around a paper cup, and she kept glancing over her shoulder, as if expecting someone to arrive and make this all true. "They all saw it," she said without preface, and I felt the floor tilt under me. She didn't elaborate at first. She told me to breathe and then slid her phone across the table like it was a piece of fragile glass. When I picked it up, I saw a screenshot that stopped my heart. A message thread with my number at the top, a sent text that read only a street address I didn't recognize and 2 words. "It's done." Beneath that was a photo taken from inside a closet, a dark frame with a figure sleeping in bed, time-stamped at 3:35 a.m. The angle was inward, like someone had set the camera low on a shelf and pushed record. My brain tried to thumb through explanations, but none fit. I had been home that night, 25 minutes away, asleep. My phone's health app said I hadn't woken up. My settings showed sleep focus active. Nothing about my devices suggested I'd been out. Still, the screenshot was there, clean and undeniable, and Nora's face said she believed it because a dozen others had seen it and sent it to her. She didn't stay long. "I can't be seen with you," she whispered, but her eyes said there was more she wanted to give me. She left a coffee ring on the table in my hands when I realized how alone I already felt. I still had questions, more than before, because now whatever had erased me from a dozen people's lives had also put an image of a sleeping friend on someone's phone. That image was a hinge. It closed the door on every question I asked and opened a new one that was far worse. I left the cafe holding a phone with a screenshot and a shoe full of gravel. And for the first time since the night began, my fear had a face. She slid the phone across the table like she was passing me something hot. The screen showed a message sent from my number at 3:20 a.m., a line with an unfamiliar street address and the words, "It's done." My throat went dry. Under that was a photo taken from inside Hannah's closet, looking out at her lying in bed, eyes closed. The timestamp read 3:35 a.m. I had been home, 25 minutes away, asleep. My stomach dropped as if someone had reached into me and turned my insides cold. I said, "This has to be fake. There's no way that's from me." Nora's face was steady in a way that made me more afraid. She said, "You weren't the only one who thought that." She told me people compared notes, showed screenshots, forwarded the same images and texts. "It spread fast," she said, voice low. I asked how many had seen it. She named names, and I felt each one like a punch. My hands started to shake. I asked how many believed it, and she said most of them. She didn't look at me when she said it, like saying it aloud might make it truer. I pulled up my phone, fumbled with my passcode, desperate to prove something to myself. My sleep focus showed 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep. Health showed no wake events for the night. The last photo on my camera roll was the 1:10 a.m. picture with Lee and Aaron, a stupid happy thing I'd keep if nothing else. I scrolled through messages for any sign that I had sent something at 3:20 a.m., and there was nothing from my device. It should have been simple proof that the messages weren't mine. But Nora slid her phone back to me and said, "They all have it. Screenshots, forwards, screenshots of screenshots. It looks like you did it." I asked how my number could have sent the message if it didn't come from my phone. Nora shrugged with that tired look people get when they've seen the worst of technology and the worst of people. "There are ways," she said. "Accounts get cloned, devices hijacked. Someone can ghost a message from your number." She spoke like she'd been explaining this to others all day, and the words landed like facts I had been too proud to know. I thought of the tablet I'd left at Ava's months ago, the one we'd used to stream shows. The idea that someone could use a forgotten device as a puppet made my head spin. I asked Nora to show me everything she had. She started to open her mouth, then froze and glanced at the cafe doorway like someone could hear her. She scanned the room quickly, eyes moving from the barista to a woman at the next table. "I can't," she whispered. "I can't show you here." Her voice sounded small and full of a kind of fear I hadn't seen in her before. She pushed the phone back toward me and said she had to go. "Don't text me later." "Don't call," she said, which felt like a sentence that meant more than it said. She stood up, left a $5 tip folded under her cup, and walked out with a purposeful, quick pace that made me think of people escaping a fire. I sat alone with the phone between my hands while the coffee next to me went cold. I held the image as if it were a thing that could explain itself, a photograph that could tell me where it came from, who took it, why my number was used. My hands trembled so hard I almost dropped the device. I tried to make sense of the timestamps, the addresses, the way the message was short and brutal. "It's done." It read like a closing line. It read like someone notifying others that something had ended, and the picture was the proof of completion. For a few minutes, I kept thinking maybe it was a nightmare I had walked into, and if I pinched myself hard enough, I would wake up at home and laugh at how ridiculous I'd been. Nora's phone screen had given me a thing to hold that proved I was being blamed. That proof was also the trap. Everyone believed a tiny rectangle of pixels instead of me. I tried to bargain with that truth, to poke holes in it, to imagine a friend pranking everyone. None of it fit. My mind sprinted through all the practical steps I could take, call the carrier, change passwords, get police involved, and then stalled at the hollow feeling of how alone I already was. The cafe noise faded into a background hum, while my phone felt heavier and heavier. I realized I was now sitting with a piece of evidence I had no context for and no way to refute in public. The cold coffee sat untouched, and my hands kept shaking as if they were trying to type an explanation into a conversation that had no room for me. I went home and tore through the place like someone had dropped clues on purpose, and I had to find them. I checked every door and every window, running my fingers along frames and locks, feeling for fresh scratches or anything out of place. The sliding balcony was jammed with a stick, just like I always did when I wanted to feel extra safe, and the deadbolt clicked firm. There were no footprints on the mat, no scuff on the doorframe, nothing to show someone had been here while I slept. It should have calmed me, but it made the whole thing worse. If no one had been in my apartment, then how was there a photo from Hannah's closet and a message from my number at 3:20 a.m.? I opened my phone and checked everything I could think of. Sleep Focus said I'd been in sleep mode from 10:30 p.m. to 6:00 a.m. The health app recorded no awakenings, no steps, nothing. It looked like an airtight alibi for the hours in question, a neat digital set of fingerprints that said I was where I said I was. I took screenshots of those records like they were a shield, slowing my breath when the images saved. If that was the kind of proof I needed, I now had it, at least in pixels I could show to someone who would listen. I called my carrier first because the message had come from my number, and I needed to prove I hadn't sent it. The call wove through menus and hold music, and then finally a human voice told me they could only verify SMS logs and help with SIM issues. iMessages go through Apple, she said, crisp and official, which meant my trail ran into a company that guarded its own backyard. I hung up feeling small and oddly exposed. My Apple ID settings were next. I clicked through account devices, and my stomach went cold when I saw an unfamiliar tablet listed under devices. It was a name I half recognized, the one I'd left at Ava's months earlier when we'd streamed shows together. It was logged into my account like a ghost with a key. I took more screenshots. I changed my password and turned on two-factor authentication, even though it felt like locking a door after you've been shown inside a house. I emailed Ava asking for the tablet back and explained the situation, and the message was read within minutes. Then, like the others, she blocked me. That reaction felt like a second slap, proof that whatever had been done was working fast and with little hesitation. I didn't have the tablet, but it was logged into my account, and someone could have used it to send messages or access devices connected to me. I sat on that thought for a long time, tapping my thumb on the kitchen counter. The message had an address, and addresses are things you can drive to. I pulled the screenshot up and followed the link to an industrial area I barely knew, a cluster of warehouse-style buildings and strip shops. The place named Safekeep Storage was an orange and gray rectangle on the map. I drove out there with the screen on my passenger seat like a paper map, feeling like I was holding a small, fragile hope. When I got there, the lot smelled like oil and hot pavement, the rows of roll-up doors lined up like teeth. The office was closed for the night. I walked the perimeter and photographed rows of orange doors and the numbers painted on them from the lot, trying to memorize anything useful. The place had the kind of anonymous geometry that makes you feel like no one would notice a single unit among hundreds. The next morning the office opened, and I told the manager I needed renter information tied to a unit number. She was polite but firm. "We don't release that without police," she said, folding a clipboard closed in a practiced motion. I tried to argue, showed her the screenshot, explained I was part of a criminal case, but she kept to her rules. There was a logic to it I respected, but also a frustration. Every small door I knocked on swung shut unless an official key was held. So I went to the police station and filed a report. The officer who took my statement was patient in a way that felt like someone trained to hear things that sound unbelievable. He asked the basics: who, what, when, and then added a warning in the same breath. Digital impersonation cases are hard. Evidence can disappear, and proving intent is tricky. He didn't say it to discourage me. He said it because he needed me to understand the reality of the work. He did open an investigation after taking my screenshots and the logs I'd grabbed from my phone. He wrote down the safekeep name and the unit numbers I'd photographed and told me he'd try to get a warrant if they could tie rental records to the unit in question. It felt like the first adult thing that had happened since the screenshots started circulating. Walking out of the station, I felt a mix of relief and dread. Relief because someone had written my story down as something that mattered. Dread because the officer's words had settled like another weight on my shoulders. I'd started the legal process and put my evidence into hands bigger than mine, but I hadn't fixed my life. People I loved still wouldn't answer, and a photo from a closet still floated around like a stone in a pond whose ripples reached everyone I knew. The investigation had begun, but starting felt very different from finishing, and I had no idea how long I'd have to wait to be believed again. Owen, the IT guy from work, agreed to help, and I felt like I'd found a small anchor. He met me at a coffee shop and asked for my phone right away, like someone who knew exactly what to look for. He connected it to his laptop, fingers moving calm and confident, and ran diagnostics while I watched the progress bar like it was a countdown. "There's an odd device logged into your Apple ID," he said, and then he showed me an old tablet I'd left at Ava's months earlier after we binge-watched a true crime show. Seeing the device name tied to my account felt like finding a key with my initials on it and not remembering who had it. Owen removed the tablet from my account and made me change my password on the spot. "Two-factor, new answers, don't recycle anything," he said, and I did it with a shaking thumb. He printed a small report showing the tablet had been active 3 weeks ago, the same window the screenshots suggested the messages may have gone out. "Someone reactivated it and used it as a proxy," he said, his voice flat like a fact. I felt a mix of relief and dread. Relief because something concrete was found, dread because it proved planning. The tablet wasn't an accident. It had been reintroduced into my digital life on purpose. I texted Ava a short message asking when I could pick up the tablet for work. The message was marked read within seconds. 2 minutes later, my number returned the digital equivalent of a slammed door. Blocked. I stared at the blank chat like it had betrayed me, then called Owen back because the pattern of blocking felt like another piece falling into place. He frowned when I told him. "She looked at it and blocked you. That's fast," he said. We both knew it was fast because whoever did this was careful and ready to cut ties the moment their cover might be blown. Owen didn't stop with the tablet. He dug deeper, tracing recent account changes and IP logs. He found that my Apple ID recovery email had been altered briefly about 2 weeks earlier, and the IP that made that change traced to a small shipping storefront in an industrial strip not far from my apartment. I drove over to that area and found a place that rented private mailboxes and hourly workspaces. The kind of storefront that looks like a neutral gray box, but does the kind of anonymous work people use for side projects, or, as I now suspected, schemes. I stood on the sidewalk and felt both foolish and furious at the same time, like someone had built a fake identity out of the things people take for convenience. While I was circling the block thinking about prepaid cards and anonymous emails, my phone pinged a notification. An unknown tracker was moving with me. My skin went cold in a way the night never had. I pulled the car into a parking lot and searched under the wheel well like a man who'd been told his name might be written on a bullet. Tucked into the shadow was an AirTag, its tiny white body catching the sun. I wrapped it in paper and carried it like a small confession to the police station, because I didn't trust myself not to throw it in the river. The detective I'd been assigned to listened without surprise, but his eyes narrowed when I turned the AirTag over in my hand. "Good you found it," he said, taking notes. He told me to vary my routes to park in different places to keep a friend close when going home late. "Whoever put that is nervous," he said. "People only leave trackers when they want to watch, and when they get nervous, they often move faster." That hit me harder than anything so far. It sounded like escalation without a headline. He told me he'd submit the AirTag to forensics to see if it had been registered to an Apple ID or associated with other devices, and he took the serial number for the report. Owen helped me export logs and make a cleaner packet of device activity. We sat in his tiny office, the light too bright, and he walked me through what the logs showed. The tablet's reactivation, the temporary recovery email change, the timestamps that lined up with the screenshots people had been sharing. He printed it all out and said, "This is the kind of thing police like to see. It ties accounts and actions." I folded the pages into a thin stack and felt like I held something that could push the world back toward sense. That night, I changed my locks myself and installed a doorbell camera. I put the AirTag in evidence with the detective and sent the packet Owen had helped me build to the officer's email. I felt safer in visible ways, a new lock, a blinking camera, but the detective's words stayed with me. They were nervous, and that meant they might move faster. I slept badly anyway, checking the camera feed like a man watching for a storm he can't see coming. The list of people who had cut me off sat in my phone, a hollow chorus, but for the first time I had a path forward. Logs, witnesses, a tracker, and a detective who finally understood this wasn't a prank. It was a plan, and someone had started putting it into motion. Owen sat across from me with a stack of printouts like a man delivering good news and bad news at once, and he started walking me through what he'd pulled. "I exported everything we can," he said, tapping the top sheet. He'd recovered full message histories from backups and created timestamped records showing all texts from my real devices. The threads showed nothing like the threatening messages people were forwarding. The logs proved the messages didn't originate from my phone or laptop. Holding those pages felt like holding a mirror that said, "You weren't here." But it didn't feel like proof until I saw the stamps and file names Owen had included. He kept going. "The tablet wasn't just active the night of the party," he said, and I felt my stomach drop again. He showed me evidence that the old tablet I'd left at Ava's had been reactivated weeks earlier. "3 weeks before," Owen said, "someone signed it back into your Apple ID and used it like an extra device." The way he said it made the whole thing sound less like a one-off and more like a plan. Someone hadn't simply found a device. They'd prepared it, brought it into my account, and waited for the right moment. We decided to bait the tablet to see how it would react. I typed a short message in iMessage aimed at the device. "I'm meeting police at Safekeep. We're checking footage tonight." I sent it and watched the delivery status with a kind of focused hope. Within minutes, the message failed to deliver and returned an error that looked ordinary and cold. Owen pointed it out. "That's a sign the device was active and then blocked or removed quickly," he said. It meant whoever controlled the tablet was watching, and when they saw a threat to their plan, they cut access fast. The failed delivery felt like catching someone mid-step and then watching them duck out of sight. Nora and I went to Safekeep that night because the address in the anonymous message led there. We parked across the street and sipped bad gas station coffee, sitting in a car that felt too big and too exposed. "If they show, don't get out of the car alone," Nora said, her voice low and sharp with a kind of practical fear that made me grateful she'd come. We watched the lot for over an hour. Around midnight, a silver sedan rolled slowly past the gate, then circled the lot 3 times, headlights off but moving with intent. We took photos of the car and its license plate with our phones. It felt small and decisive, like a piece of the puzzle snapping into place. The manager at Safekeep later checked his logs after I filed a police request and confirmed an access swipe at 2:50 a.m. on the night of the party. Hearing him say the time out loud made the hairs on my arms stand up. It matched the timeline of the photos. I handed the printouts from Owen to the detective and pushed for the manager's log to be checked against any security cam footage. It was a chain of hands and timestamps that started to look like a real map. Then Hannah's building management turned over guest entry records. They showed a guest access code used at 2:47 a.m. that night, and the code was linked to a phone number tied to Ava's account. When I saw that in black and white, I felt something in me shift from panic toward a different kind of cold clarity. The guest code time and the Safekeep access were within minutes of each other, and the reactivated tablet's activity window matched the same week. The sequence began to make sense in a grim way. Tablet reactivated, prepaid cards bought at the shipping shop, a storage unit rented, footage possibly stored or equipment staged at the unit, and then access to Hannah's building within minutes during the same early morning. I felt the timeline line up under me like train tracks. It didn't mean guilt in court yet, but it meant someone had connected dots deliberately to make everyone else see a picture that blamed me. I kept saying that out loud to Nora and Owen like a way to push the panic back into the box where evidence lives. Nora said, "It's not stories anymore, it's documents." Owen added, "We keep pushing. Records, receipts, timestamps, that's how this gets fixed." The detective promised to follow the rental records for the unit and subpoena the shipping shop surveillance. For the first time since the screenshots went viral among my friends, the chaos around me had a shape. It was a shape that could be chased. I still felt raw and alone, but I finally had stepping stones that might lead to an answer, and I hoped, to clearing my name. Hannah called me the morning the maintenance team came through, her voice tight when she said, "They found something." I drove over because I couldn't sit with the waiting anymore, and I remember stepping into the hallway and feeling like I'd walked back into one of those scenes that don't belong to you. The maintenance guy met me at the closet door and explained he'd taken the slats apart to check for damage and pulled something that looked like a tiny black button from between the boards. He held it out like it was nothing, but when I saw it, I felt a kind of hot clarity. This was the device in Ava's unboxing photos I'd seen weeks earlier, the same look and size, the same cheap, hidden camera design. I asked him to hand it to me. It was smaller than my thumb and cold. "How long has it been here?" I said, but even as the words left me, I knew the answer was a long time. Hannah stood back and watched, hands wound into each other. Her eyes were wet but furious. "I don't know who to trust," she said, and the sentence landed between us like a broken plate. Police arrived minutes later with uniforms and a seriousness that made my knees want to bend. They put on gloves, bagged the tiny camera, and treated it like something that could carry stories inside. One of the detectives said, "This changes the scope of our case," and then used the phrase I'd been hoping to hear: potential felony charges for unauthorized surveillance. Hearing that made the whole thing feel less like an impossible nightmare and more like something the law could chew on. Detectives moved fast after that. They served warrants for the storage facility records and the shipping storefront. The paper trail started to show itself in ways my brain could follow. The unit number matched a rental paid with a prepaid card. The email tied to the rental matched an old streaming account the police traced back to Ava. When the shipping shop gave over surveillance footage, it was like watching a slow reveal in a film. Someone who looked like Ava buying a prepaid card, face turned away from the camera, but with a gait I recognized. They matched the transaction to a card used for the storage rental. Meeting those small, pedestrian facts felt like stacking bricks under a shaky wall. The detectives said they had enough to connect the storage unit to the tablet and the prepaid card to the purchase seen on camera. The hole in the story was starting to fill. Not everyone wanted to watch the wall being rebuilt. Some friends recoiled even when the evidence pointed away from me. Fear works stubborn ways, it clings. Messages came in that were short and cold, people saying it was complicated or that they needed distance. Friends I'd laughed with for years typed things like, "I can't do this right now." Nora told me she'd been pressured by someone to step away from helping, and a mutual friend sent a message telling her to stop because it was unsafe. Their silence felt like another kind of injury. I understood fear, but I also understood the sting of being protected from, rather than supported through, the truth. Hannah did something I didn't expect. She messaged the group thread and said she'd found the camera and apologized to me. Reading her message felt like an opening. It wasn't a full fix for everything lost, but it was a start. Some people responded with relief, others stayed quiet. The detective called me and confirmed the camera's serial number matched the model sold in the unboxing Ava had posted. He said the unit we found in the closet was consistent with the angles in the photos that had been shared, and that the storage unit's access log put someone in the area at the right time. It wasn't a courtroom yet, but it was a file that might hold. After that, I did practical things that felt small and important. I filed for a temporary restraining order because the idea of legal boundaries gave me a sliver of control. I started weekly therapy with a clinician who specialized in betrayal and stalking trauma. The sessions were hard. They were also the only place I could lay out the whole mess and not have anyone cut me off mid-sentence. I changed locks again, kept my doorbell camera on, and rebuilt routines like morning runs and small grocery trips that felt like reclaiming territory. I tightened the circle of people I let in, a few coworkers, Nora, Owen, and two others who hadn't wavered. Their presence felt like repair in small doses. The detective continued to work the case, serving subpoenas and compiling the evidence packet. He told me the storage unit rental and the camera were strong links in the chain, and that turning those into charges would be a matter of proving who paid and who accessed accounts. It would take time, patience, and more corroboration. I prepared for that with patience and paperwork and regular check-ins with my lawyer friend who helped me understand the motions and forms. The legal process made the chaos feel like something that could move forward even if, at times, it crawled. Weeks later, the immediate panic had thinned into a steadier kind of life. I still checked my phone with an instinctive quickness, but I also went to therapy, worked, and met friends who'd stayed. A few relationships didn't recover, and that part was a grief I worked through with my therapist. Some friendships reformed slowly, cautious but real. The police continued to pursue the case, and we handed over stacks of logs, the camera, and surveillance clips. I kept living in small, deliberate ways: morning coffee, locked doors, a doorbell that chirped when someone approached. The world I had been used to was smaller, quieter, and more careful, but it was mine again in a way that felt earned. The evidence had begun to point toward accountability, and that knowledge made the long, uncertain weeks feel like they were walking in a direction that might lead to justice.
Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next video. And drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts.